afternoon, and thank you all for being here this afternoon for this opportunity to engage with us around the Manuel Ellis case. Last Thursday, the city manager and police chief and the city council and I stood together and provided initial statements on the Attorney General's charging decisions in the Ellis case. In today's study session, the city manager and police chief provided an update to the council, and I and the city manager committed to weekly Tuesday updates of their administrative investigation. I said last Thursday that what we have to share may raise more questions than answers, and that remains true today. Although the information we have available to us today is likely to be unsatisfying, we know our partners in the media have a valuable role to play in informing the public, and we want to provide time for you to ask your questions. We don't have all the answers yet, but we will be sharing more as we learn it. Now, you heard me be very clear about last week we stood together to make those statements, and so we are here again today. Both myself as a policymaker and our city manager and our interim police chief as the interim, and our police chief as the administrative leaders of our city. So likely today, a lot of questions that you ask may be addressed by any one of them, but we all wanted to be present because we all play a role, not just in this particular case, but in running this city every day. So wanted to make sure that we were clear about that, and we will answer questions as they fit our individual responsibilities. So with that, I will turn it over to MCO to begin facilitating the questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Our first question is from Matt Lorch from Q13 News.
Well, first of all, thank you for joining us, especially Mayor, on what sounds like a challenging day. I have a question for the Mayor and one for the Chief as well. Mayor Woodards, you have called for the officers involved to be fired in the past. As you reflected on these charges over the long holiday weekend, have you changed your posture on that, and have you taken any additional action to make that happen? And for the Chief, after you answer, Mayor, Chief Akey, I know the Tacoma Police Department is conducting an internal review. It sounds like you just briefed the city manager and the council on that. Do you have anything new to report publicly to the media and the people of your city and Pierce County when it comes to that review? But Mayor, if you could answer first, thank you.
Yeah, and Matt, thank you for the question and the acknowledgement. So let me be really clear. That statement reflected my personal feelings based on the information I had at the time. Well, what we've seen with the reinstatement of the Atlanta officer, and the consequences for not following due process, I don't want that to happen here in Tacoma. So I'm supporting our administrative leaders to carry out their internal investigation to make sure that due process happens so that any decisions that are made will be sustainable. Chief, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt, in regards to the question of what's new to report on the review, as we work through our own, with our own legal advisors and our own counsel, we've reached out to the Attorney General's office to request the unredacted police reports from the Washington State Patrol and the Pierce County Sheriff's Office. And we're waiting for their response.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kari Plogue from KNKX.
Hi, thank you all for joining us today. My question is, I want to get a little bit more specific about the review that you all are conducting right now. What action is the city authorized to take following a review like this? And specifically, can you spell out what's in a collective bargaining agreement with Tacoma police officers that governs the city's options for discipline when those officers are charged with a crime, such as the case here?
Thank you, Carrie. We're going to turn that over to our city manager to start.
Well, certainly I can start, and then the chief can fill in. So, Carrie, thank you. We have an administrative process that's required that requires an internal affairs investigation, which would involve collecting evidence from various sources and then reviewing that evidence for sufficiency of taking action. We are not limited in the action that we take. The action that we take will relate back to what we learn in the course of our investigation. I cannot cite you the collective bargaining agreement provisions, but I can tell you that that collective bargaining agreement is available to the public. You can link to it on our human resources page under collective bargaining agreements. And I believe it also shows up on our TPD page as well.
Oh, go ahead, Chief.
Hey, Kari, I just want to add, as part of that internal affairs and internal review process, we follow established protocols and policies regarding potential disciplinary matters, which includes notice of investigations, notices of interviews, sufficiency hearings, laudermill process. So we're going to continue to follow those established protocols.
Thanks, Chief. And Kari has a follow-up question.
Yeah, so my next question is I kind of want to get an idea of when the hiring process for a permanent police chief may get picked back up again, and what role that person might play in whatever action is taken after this review is finished.
Thank you, and that's something that we've begun reporting out in our weekly transformational updates. And what we shared last week is that we're doing our internal planning for the process, and we want to be able to be in a position to kick off our search as soon as August, and sooner if we can be prepared to do that. And the role that chief would play depends on where the process is when that we have enough information to make decisions. Certainly that position regardless will have a significant role in our transformation efforts, which we have already begun, but we intend to be continuing, and I imagine will continue for a number of years. So that role is crucial both in this decision-making process, potentially given timing, but certainly in our overall transformation efforts.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kevin Coe from Cairo 7.
Hi there. I got a few questions, but I know we got a long line here. So let me get the one out of the way for the mayor here, because I know she's on a tighter schedule. Mayor, you just said you felt like the answers provided to the public last week were unsatisfying. Can you explain a little bit more why you feel like some of the initial comments made when the charges were announced may be unsatisfying to the public?
Oh, and Kevin, thank you for clarifying that question. I didn't mean the statements that were made last week were unsatisfying. I meant what we say here today, or what we said at our press conference last week would be unsatisfying. So, last week we did just a press statement. So that's what I was talking about, that being unsatisfying, because we don't have all the answers, and some of the answers are going to be more process driven. People are tired of waiting. We have tested patients, and we continue to ask for patients. So that's what I meant by saying unsatisfying, just the timing and the information that is available to us.
Got you. And I know previously you also said some of the comments you initially made last year were based off kind of your personal opinions, right? Is that also kind of a personal perspective as well, where you're kind of frustrated with the speed of how this investigation may be going?
Oh, I'm absolutely frustrated. I'm frustrated, but also I'm like I'm a human being. I feel like everybody else does. And as the leader of this city, the pressure on my shoulders is large. But while I'm frustrated, I also am grateful that they took time and did their due diligence. The family called for an independent, thorough investigation, and that's what they got. And so I'm grateful that we were able to get that independent, thorough investigation, but that takes time. And I stand with everybody else. We'd like to have this result sooner, but it takes what it takes in order to get all of the information, in order to get to the truth.
Thank you, Mayor. Next, we have Allison Needles from the News Tribune. And a reminder to reporters, if you'd like to ask a follow-up question, please press the raise hand button. Allison?
Hello, all. Thank you for your time here today. My question is, can you clarify, will the officers who were charged stay employed until they are either convicted or found not guilty?
And thanks, Allison. I'll just start off on that one and have the chief supplement my response if necessary. So the current status of the officers is paid administrative leave. As we continue to get new information, we will keep review of their employment and leave status, one of the things that's subject to review. So for the time being, that is their status, and we will continue to review that as we get more information. Chief, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that answered it well. Thank you.
And Allison does have a follow-up. Go ahead, Allison.
Thank you. Is there an estimate to how long the internal investigation will take?
Allison, that is a really good question. And the answer is, at this point, we don't have an estimate. The estimate will again, with weekly updates, if there's a point at which we think we can give an estimate, we will provide that. But we're still at this time collecting information and evidence. And so we don't know at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Tim Groover from Center Square. Tim, go ahead.
Hi, I know Pierce County is in the process of reducing pretrial incarceration across the board. This particular case has gotten a lot of attention for the 3 officers involved being able to make a 6-figure bail. Do you believe the city is at all interested in supporting ending the bail system, as many have called for?
I guess, Tim, that's a good question for me as the policymaker. I will tell you, I haven't had an opportunity to study that issue very well. It's not something that I've heard talked a lot about here in our city, or at least not in the people that I've been talking with. But certainly if that is something that our community starts to move forward and think that's a discussion that needs to be had, we will have it. But that's actually set through Pierce County Court. So it's not necessarily something that we have a lot of control over, but we can certainly advocate. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Next, we have Jonathan Cho from Como News. Jonathan.
Hi, this is the question for the chief. Chief, can you hear me?
Yes,
Thanks.
I can.
Chief, I just wanted to ask you if you've had a chance to actually look at the charging documents and the allegations against your officers, which are extremely serious and run counter to the narrative that your agency initially said happened that evening. What are your thoughts on these allegations, and how are the officers doing right now?
Hey, John, I'll try to answer. I think you asked a couple of questions. I think the first thing is this: I read the declaration of probable cause by the AG's office, read it a couple of times this weekend. In regards to your question or statement regarding it contradicts what we have said, I want to make a clarification. We didn't make a comment regarding that. We supported the independent investigation since the day of the incident. Within hour or so of the incident, we called for Pierce County to come and conduct an investigation. So with that, and within the spirit of the I-940, we stayed out of that and letting an independent process come through. I think your last question was in regards to how the officers are feeling. I would tell you is this: we have a wide range of varied emotions going through our department, as one would expect. So with that process, just like everyone else and everything that's serious, people need time to process this information.
Chief, could I ask a follow-up?
Please go ahead.
Chief, I also wanted to ask you, the police union has come out to call this a witch hunt. With all the critical statements made against the officers, your agency, do you believe your officers, if it even gets to this point, can get a fair trial? It seems like they've already been convicted in the court of public opinion. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. There's a lot of comments that people are going to make throughout our community. One of the things that myself and the leadership with the Tacoma Police Department have to do is focus on what we need to do to service to the community, focus on the welfare of our officers. So we're going to stay focused in that perspective. You had a second piece to that question. Can you repeat that?
Do you believe they could get a fair trial after all this negative publicity against the police and in this environment?
I have faith in the system that we have and that we live under. We're an organization that establishes, respects, and follows the rule of law. We have to believe in that. We have to believe in the democracy and all the rights thereof. So when it goes through this process, I think just not myself, but everybody in this department and everybody in the community expect this process to be full and transparent, and everyone agrees that there's a due process that's respected and followed.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Lionel Donovan from King 5. Lionel.
Good afternoon, everyone. The first question I have a follow-up after this is that we've heard from Police Chief Aki that there is an internal disciplinary investigation that's being put forward by the 3 police officers. But could you explain to us exactly why the 3 officers still need to remain employed or even on paid administrative leave? They're still collecting tax dollars from Tacoma residents. So throughout this entire process, why do you all feel, or could you explain why you think the officers still need to be employed by the Tacoma PD?
Elizabeth or Chief?
Sure, I can start there, and thank you for that question. So what our jobs are right now is to operate within the law in administering both our disciplinary process, including the employment status of these officers, and starting with due process with our contract with Local 6 and our own policies. It's a check on governmental power to say you have to have certain powers before you can take away jobs or pay. So what we're doing right now is focusing, like the chief said, we're focusing on making sure that our process complies with the existing laws, and that the disciplinary actions that we take are in alignment with what we established during our investigation and can be sustained and not challenged from a legal perspective.
All right, and my follow-up question is, there have been some criticisms from some who've said that the employment status of Tacoma's police officers may be too centralized. And we're wondering if the city of Tacoma planned on addressing some of those concerns.
So I have to tell you, honestly, I'm not sure what you mean by your question. The employment status too centralized. If what you mean by that is the decision rests within the organization of the city of Tacoma, I would just mention to you that in some of our transformational efforts, community oversight is something that we support. It's an outcome we expect from our transformation process. And we will be working closely with community-led efforts to establish that. And there's also new state law that provides some level of oversight as well that we also support. But I'm sorry if I'm missing your question.
No, it's okay. It was just in regards, there have been some who have the perception that that the employment status of police officers rests solely with the city manager. And so I was just wondering if that was something that you all wanted to address.
Thanks, Lionel. Next is Jeff Pogula.
Yeah, I guess my question is more about clarification. The internal investigation that's being conducted, the results of that, would they be limited to, say, disciplinary action or policy changes, or could they result in a recommendation of charges forward to the prosecutor's office?
Hey, Jeff, I'll answer that question. Our administrative review is purely administrative. It's going to focus on the employment aspect of the officers who are charged.
Thank you. We have 4 more questions. Last chance, if anyone else has a question, please press the raise hand button. Next up is another question from Allison Needles from the News Tribune.
Hello again. This, I think, is a question for Chief Aki. We heard on Friday last week during the hearing that Officer Collins had moved out of state and started a new job. Did TPD know this? And are there any rules governing where officers can live and if they can hold down multiple jobs?
Well, thanks, Allison. I think the first time I heard this information was probably the same time you heard it. And in the questions that I've had for my own staff is that I found out that Officer Collins does not have a second job. It's not employed by another organization. So he's still a full-time Tacoma police officer. In regards to where he can live, that's the choice of each individual that works within our department.
Thank you. Next up, we have Paige Browning from KUOW.
Hi there. Thanks again so much for making time for all of us today. I just wanted to ask something about the pace of the investigation you're doing. Can one of you just comment on what would it take to speed up the investigation? You know, the officers are on leave. They've been charged. People want answers or a conclusion or some closure. What will it take to speed it up?
So Paige, again, I'll start and let the chief fill in. Is, you know, certainly we hear and feel and join in the sense of urgency for accountability. And we have, the chief has in particular, in his role in the department, put together a team that is focused solely on these investigations so that we can move as in an expedited way. We've also been meeting over the course of time to evaluate our process steps and make sure that each of the steps that we go through are actually required for purposes of due process or to meet our contractual obligations. So we have been working in that mindset even prior to these charges so that we'd be ready to move as quickly as we can move. And again, part of our reporting out on a weekly cadence is to continue to be accountable to where we are in our process. Chief, is there anything else you want to add about our focus on moving this quickly within our process?
Thanks, Elizabeth. Paige, I think we said earlier is this. A lot of factors are determined in regards to pace of that investigation. The first thing we did, as we mentioned, was to request that full unredacted investigation from the AG's office regarding the Washington State Patrol investigation and the Pierce County Sheriff's Organization. I think anyone can really get to the point where we have to have the complete and full official statements and evidence available. We have to have the full and complete records in order for us to move forward. We're moving towards that process. Administratively, what we did was create an ad hoc unit in addition to the existing internal affairs unit. I have a lieutenant and two very experienced sergeants that's going to work only and solely on this Manuel Ellis investigation.
Thank you. 3 more questions. Next is Kevin Coe from Cairo.
I got a couple of questions here. First one for the chief. I was wondering, what exactly are these officers who are all on paid administrative leave? If the idea here is that one person may be in another state, possibly, what exactly are they doing within the department if they are still employed? And my next question after that was for Elizabeth Pauley. Last Thursday, when we were at that press conference with the family and the Tacoma Action Collective, which has been working very closely with the family of Manuel Ellis, we heard your name specifically called out. And there was something said that they're hearing some of the words you're saying as being, quote, lip service. And I'm wondering if you have a response to that specific, pretty strong accusation as well.
Okay, Kevin, I'll answer the first part of the question since you addressed me. What are the 3 officers doing on administrative leave? I can tell you from now until the conclusion of the investigation, they will be they will avail themselves to this process. So whatever timeline we have regarding interviews or whatever administrative process that we have, they will be available to meet all our timelines.
So in terms of lip service. I think what how I take those comments that we get from the public is we have an issue with trust and the public and understand that. And as it's directed to me, what I can say is that I will continue to act in my role in both moving this administrative process forward, or my oversight of this administrative process, to make sure that it's the process that is required, both from the standpoint of the law and that it's communicated out and transparently to the public, and also will continue to act in the realm of transformation, as we also report out weekly in our efforts. And so I can just say, watch my actions, and people can certainly decide for themselves whether they can trust my words, but hopefully my actions speak for themselves.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kari Plogue from KNKX.
Hey, thanks again. So I kind of want to dovetail off that question that was just asked again, related to lip service. A lot of members of the community have expressed concern, and they've lost trust in the Tacoma Police Department. And I know that there's lots of talk about transformation at the council level, and like philosophical talks about that. But I'm curious, what tangible steps are city leaders taking to avoid future deadly encounters between police and civilians?
Well, I'll start from a policy perspective, and then I'll let Elizabeth and our chief jump in here. I mean, and the list is long, but I guess I want to lift up the work that has already been done, like body cams on every patrol officer. We are now looking at providing using some of our federal dollars to get dash cameras. We've implemented 8 Can't Wait. We just came out with 64 recommendations from 21st Century Policing. Those are actions. That's not just talk. It's not just lip service. Those are actions that we're taking. One of the things I'm especially proud of with our city manager is the fact that we now have 2 community members who sit at the bargaining table. That was our city manager's idea and her responsibility to carry out, and she has. Elizabeth, I'll stop there and allow you to jump in with anything else.
Well, I think maybe the chief can speak more directly to some of the things that are underway, and I'll fill in with the chief.
Well, thanks, Kari. I think there's a lot of tangible steps that we made forward. So as you know, that we've been working with very nationally recognized 21st Century Policing Solutions, who's provided 64 recommendations in how we can better build trust and better improve the processes of our department. We also worked with the matrix staffing study and alternative response to see what do we need to do to change our processes, evaluate our processes, and challenge how do we do policing in the future. When we talk about reform, we talk about transformation, and what does that mean? Because we know that the policing today is going to be different than the policing of yesterday, and what the policing of the future is going to be. We take a look at how the city of Tacoma has been integrated and very influential in the different House bills that were moved forward and signed off by the governor. There's a lot of processes that we have in place. We're also reaching out with key stakeholders. You know, when we're talking about Heal the Heart organization, Project Base 2, CPAC, these are all key stakeholders within our community that we're reaching out to, and not telling them what we're going to do, getting together and collaborating to see where we're going to go in the future. I think there's so many steps that I'm not even mentioning. A lot of solid steps towards the changes that I think that groups within our community are asking for.
And there is one I would like to focus on as well. Is we also have a completed study that's available on our website as well for diverting certain calls for service from the police department. And the importance of that is if we can find better ways to answer the calls for service, ways that avoid or reduce harm in the community. That was the point of that study. We now have it in hand, and we're moving towards implementation. So that's just another tangible example of things that we're doing to avoid these kinds of situations in the future.
Thank you. We have a couple more questions. We're going to stop taking additional spots in the line. But our next one is from Jonathan Cho from Como.
This question is for the mayor. Mayor, earlier during this press conference, you alluded to the fact that about a year ago, you were quoted as saying you wanted these officers fired and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Do you have any regrets about that statement? Do you walk that back, or do you still stand by that? And following up to that, do you believe it's possible these officers, because of your statements, may not get a fair trial if it even gets to that point?
So I'm going to answer the second question first, and that is, I trust the system. I believe that the system will work as it is intended to work, and that they will get their due process. And the answer to the first question was no, I do not walk my statement back.
Chief, could I ask you a follow-up question? Last question for me.
Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
Chief, do you believe the mayor standing by her statements, even though they're personal, are detrimental to the process here for your officers getting a fair trial? And do you believe that statement is divisive, especially to the rest of your officers in the Tacoma Police Department?
Hey, Jonathan, obviously that question that you're asking is very controversial. And what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to focus in on what's happening within our department, focus in on our investigation, making sure the right due processes are taking place, and making sure that people see the transparency in our actions and see the changes that we're going to make. One thing that I would say is this: I am confident in the system that we have. We have a great system, still one of the greatest systems in the world. Our democracy has to work. It should work. And this process of due process that's going to be shown to the officers, it's going to be respected, and we look forward to what happens in the future.
And Chief, have you personally spoken to the 3 officers charged? I just wanted to clarify that, not just your entire rank and file, but the 3 officers charged. Have you spoken to them? Could you tell us how they're doing?
Yeah, Jonathan, I haven't talked to them yet. I haven't since the day of the arraignment. I haven't talked to them.
And can I just want to jump in here just real quickly. I just want to add something to the question that I answered for you, Jonathan. I want to be very clear. We have amazing officers in Tacoma, people who signed up to protect and serve, who show up every day at that building behind our chief to do the work that the city has called them to do. I stand by every one of those officers and the work that they do on behalf of our community. This is but an incident. It doesn't speak to the entire department or everyone who works in the department. So I think Tacoma is blessed to have officers, some of whom I've even gone to school with, who work for our police department, who are protecting our city every day.
Next, we have Lionel Donovan from King.
Yes, hi. I want to revisit the point we said in regards to the oversight in the employment process for police officers. Could you go in a bit more detail as to what that oversight looks like and how effective that you think it would be?
I think I want to clarify, as I've thought about your question, a couple things when we use the term oversight. So at the first stages, the chief in his role will have oversight of the internal investigation. He will also, he has the decision-making authority in terms of any proposed discipline, policy changes, or training changes that we need to make based on that investigation. I have oversight of the chief in my role as city manager. What I thought you were getting at before is whether or not some of these investigations need to be reviewed externally by other bodies. And when that's what the process I was talking about, that we expect to be an outcome of our community-led process, is that some different level of oversight of incidents that we are involved in to happen outside of the department. And we intend to be working with those community-led efforts to determine what the oversight model is that will work best for the city of Tacoma.
I'm sorry. I think I might have been misunderstood. I was talking about in regards to who has the final say or the final decision when it comes to firing police officers. From what I'm understanding, there was comments made before where the mayor called on the city manager to fire the 3 officers. So I'm speaking in regards to that, or in regards to firing police officers, like that process. And I think just to
Okay,
revisit,
sure.
that you're saying was too centralized. So I was wondering if moving forward, would that be something the city of Tacoma might want to address?
So again, I'm sorry, I'm struggling to answer your question directly. So right now, the chief has the authority to fire and to hire and to discipline, including up to and including firing. And I have authority over the chief for that decision making. For any other model of it not being that centralized, we would need changes in our policies, in our contracts, and there are none of those in place at this time, but I think that that's going to be something we're going to be discussing with community groups as we go forward with our transformation process.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to be clear. Does your decision supersede that of the police chiefs when it comes to firing? You said that your decision, you have oversight in regards to the police chiefs. So does your word supersede the police chiefs?
So it could. It never has, and I don't anticipate that it will in this situation. We work closely together, and I trust the chief's discretion. So right now, I consider him fully the hiring and firing authority.
Our next question comes from Heather Bosch from Cairo Radio, being read by Maria Lee.
So Heather would like to know, what is the range of disciplinary issues the city can take?
I think if the question is disciplinary outcomes, the whole range, including suspension, demotion, termination, the whole range of discipline is open to us, depending on, again, where the process leads.
All right, 2 more questions. Next is Allison Needles from the News Tribune.
Hi, thanks, Kenny. My question is about the other 2 Tacoma officers who responded that night. Are they going to return to work, and if so, when?
Hi, Allison. I'll answer that question. So the 2 officers who are on administrative leave will stay on administrative leave until we conduct this investigation. It might be a preliminary, some decisions that will affect those 2 officers because they were charged, but the same process of use of force and departmental policy still applies to officers, whether they are charged or not.
So they're part of the internal investigation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And our last question is from Jeff Pogula. Jeff, will you remind us your agency?
Yeah, Como Radio, but this one's going to be easy. My question was already answered by one of the previous reporters, so I don't have anything to ask.
All right, that was our last question. Mayor, I'll pass it to you.
Great. Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today and for asking the very difficult questions that our community needs to hear the answers to. I am extremely proud to live in a city where people continue to be engaged, even when times are tough. And I just want to thank Tacoma and Tacomans for staying engaged and making sure that we continuously hear. We appreciate your patience, and we will continue to prioritize transparency as we move forward with our portion of this investigation. You all can tell from what you've heard today that there is still a lot of work to do on our end. And we are going to be moving forward on transformation and to honor transparency in that work. I want to assure our officers that they are doing the right thing, and we support them when they wake up every day to care for our city. At the same time, in the case of Manuel Ellis specifically, I know that our city manager and our chief take their responsibilities seriously as they continue to pursue their administrative investigation. I am proud of our community for staying engaged, as I said earlier, and I hope that you will keep showing up and speaking out and holding us accountable. To all the reporters who are here today, Thank you for attending. Thank you for telling our story. Again, as you've heard, this information and other updates will be given every week on Tuesday. We have two web pages that are stood up at this time. One is cityoftacoma.org/transform, where you will be able to find all of the information on what we're actually doing to transform Tacoma. And then on the website cityoftacoma.org/use of force, you will find all of the updates that we give here, links to these press conferences,